The Painted Veil by Somerset Maugham. Chapter 3. She went out onto the veranda and watched him leave the house. He waved his hand to her. It gave her a little thrill as she looked at him. He was 41, but he had the lithe figure and the springing step of a boy. The veranda was in shadow, and lazily, her heart at ease with satisfied love, she lingered. Their house stood in the happy valley, on the side of the hill, for they could not afford to live on the more eligible but expensive peak. But her abstracted gaze scarcely noticed the blue sea and the crowded shipping in the harbor. She could think only of her lover. Of course it was stupid to behave as they had done that afternoon, but if he wanted her, how could she be prudent? He had come 2 or 3 times after tiffin, when in the heat of the day no one thought of stirring out, and not even the boys had seen him come and go. It was very difficult at Hong Kong. She hated the Chinese city, and it made her nervous to go into the filthy little house off the Victoria Road in which they were in the habit of meeting. It was a curio dealer's, and the Chinese who were sitting about stared at her unpleasantly. She hated the ingratiating smile of the old man who took her to the back of the shop and then up a dark flight of stairs. The room into which he led her was frowsy, and the large wooden bed against the wall made her shudder. "This is dreadfully sordid, isn't it?" she said to Charlie the first time she met him there. "It was till you came in," he answered. Of course, the moment he took her in his arms she forgot everything. Oh, how hateful it was that she wasn't free, that they both weren't free. She didn't like his wife. Kitty's wandering thoughts dwelt now for a moment on Dorothy Townsend. How unfortunate to be called Dorothy. It dated you. She was 38 at least. But Charlie never spoke of her. Of course he didn't care for her. She bored him to death. But he was a gentleman. Kitty smiled with affectionate irony. It was just like him. Silly old thing. He might be unfaithful to her, but he would never allow a word in disparagement of her to cross his lips. She was a tallish woman, taller than Kitty, neither stout nor thin, with a good deal of pale brown hair. She could never have been pretty with anything but the prettiness of youth. Her features were good enough without being remarkable, and her blue eyes were cold. She had a skin that you would never look at twice, and no color in her cheeks. And she dressed like what she was, the wife of the assistant colonial secretary at Hong Kong. Kitty smiled and gave her shoulders a faint shrug. Of course no one could deny that Dorothy Townsend had a pleasant voice. She was a wonderful mother. Charlie always said that of her, and she was what Kitty's mother called a gentlewoman. But Kitty did not like her. She did not like her casual manner, and the politeness with which she treated you when you went there, to tea or dinner, was exasperating because you could not but feel how little interest she took in you. The fact was, Kitty supposed, that she cared for nothing but her children. There were 2 boys at school in England, and another boy of 6 whom she was going to take home next year. Her face was a mask. She smiled and in her pleasant, well-mannered way said the things that were expected of her, but for all her cordiality held you at a distance. She had a few intimate friends in the colony, and they greatly admired her. Kitty wondered whether Mrs. Townsend thought her a little common. She flushed. After all, there was no reason for her to put on airs. It was true that her father had been a colonial governor, and of course it was very grand while it lasted. Everyone stood up when you entered a room, and men took off their hats to you as you passed in your car, but what could be more insignificant than a colonial governor when he had retired? Dorothy Townsend's father lived on a pension in a small house at Earl's Court. Kitty's mother would think it a dreadful bore if she asked her to call. Kitty's father, Bernard Garstin, was a K.C., and there was no reason why he should not be made a judge one of these days. Anyhow, they lived in South Kensington.